Pokédex lore, there is a particularly creepy story within the Hatterene line. Have you ever heard the story of the Forest Witch? Well, let's start at the beginning. Begin our tale at the beginning with a Pokemon named as Hatenna. Hatenna was born with a protrusion on its head that makes it extremely susceptible to emotions, particularly very powerful emotions. You see, Hatenna will never willingly go to places that are heavily populated due to the emotions of all of the people that live there being so loud. Imagine being able to hear everyone in your hometown all at the same time in your own head. A torturous experience. And so Hatennas obviously avoid these type of places. And so once Hatenna was able to find a nice secluded area where the voices of all of these people were no longer, particularly a forest, it got comfortable enough to change. And this is where Hatcham takes the stage. Now Hatcham, having learned from his experience as a Hatenna, will never be found near those populated places again. And if one unlucky person was to walk through the secluded sanctuary that Hatcham had found for itself with any sort of powerful emotions, Hatcham would silence them immediately. You see, again, those strong emotions are like extremely loud noises to Hatcham, even more so being an even stronger psychic Pokemon now. And so whether that victim be person or Pokemon, whatever creature brings strong emotions into her domain will be beaten senseless into silence by these braids that Hatcham has. And so once again, silence falls within the witch's domain. And so as more time passes, weeks and months go by, Hatcham becomes even more powerful and even more comfortable within this isolation. And at some point, Hatcham disappears from this forest as she fully steps into her final, most elegant form, the terrifying forest witch herself, Hatterene. Now at this point, Hatterene's psychic abilities have become so powerful to the point where she can erect a psychic barrier that acts as a deterrent for anyone looking to enter her fortress. And if for some reason she allows you past the psychic barrier, if you're too loud, she will then tear you apart with the tentacle claws that she has on her head. Beware of the forest that has no living creatures, because that might be a sign that a Hatterene is in the area. No creature is safe if a Hatterene decides that this forest is where she wants to lay down roots. So a warning to all of my fellow trainers, stay calm, be quiet, because the Forest Witch is always listening. When it comes to Pokédex lore and Pokemon, sometimes a Pokemon's origin is shrouded in mystery. Its genesis having been lost to time or having never been written at all. So let's take a look at a day where a Solosis decided it was time to find where it came from. In the abandoned ruins of a laboratory long since been out of use, a green gelatinous orb floats down a collapsed hallway. As it silently floats over mounds of broken glass, strewn about papers, and puddles of sewage and water, it is stopped by a section of hallway that is essentially crumbled and caved in, its path being blocked by huge blocks of concrete and debris. It scans the wall looking for any opening or hole that it might be able to squeeze through, but unfortunately, none of the holes match its own size. So it does what any logical psychic Pokemon would think to do, and it begins lifting the debris with its psychic abilities. Quickly but very carefully, Solosis lifts the debris up just enough to have enough space to slip underneath. But see, as Solosis is making its way through the tunnel that it's created for itself, the slime and puddles that were on the ground behind it begin to rise. Arms of sludge and slime reaching out and grabbing the ground, pushing themselves up. As Solosis looks on disgusted at this sight, it sees what we would recognize to be a congealed mass of Grimer and muck all merged together. The arms of this muck and Grimer mass combine into one giant disgusting arm as they swing it in Solosis' direction, launching these blobs of this toxic waste mixed with glass and papers and whatever else was found in this hallway. Solosis erecting this psychic barrier blocks this attack from this monster, quickly turning around and darting through the tunnel that it created for itself. But it won't get away that easily as the muck and grime mass begins crawling its way through the tunnel that Solosis has created. Faster and faster, this muck and grime is seeping, flooding down the hallway, going to grab at this Solosis. But Solosis thinks to itself, idiot, as it drops the rubble right on top of this mass of filth, completely crushing it and trapping it in this hallway. Solosis shakes its head and turns around as it continues down this abandoned building in search of what could be its beginning. As it flies from room to room, looking through papers and documents, trying to figure out where it could have come from. Nothing that it is reading is adding up, and it's starting to believe that none of the researchers that it was with even knew where it came from either. In its frustration, it lifts a couple of nearby beakers and slams them into the wall. As it flies out of the room to continue down the hole where it was going, where it came from, 4 sets of eyes are watching it very closely. Solosis makes its way to a very familiar looking playground type of room. Abandoned playground equipment, stuffed animals, and toys strewn about all throughout this room, it remembers the days of when it used to be one of the very many research Pokemon that were in this laboratory. As Solosis looks about, reminiscing on what used to be, something flies by it, a pebble of debris. Solosis quickly turns around and another pebble of debris quickly shoots through the gelatinous outer ring of its body. Ducking behind some of the playground equipment, more and more of these pebbles are flying out of the darkness. Could it be that monster from earlier? How did it escape from underneath all of that rubble? It thinks to itself. And as it's thinking this, a rock pierces right through an opening in the slide and knocks it back. After being struck, Solosis tumbles back and rights itself up, ready for its next attack, ready to defend itself. But from another direction, a rock comes and flies through and hits the back of its head, or what looks to be its head. Solosis' vision goes blurry after the strike from that rock, and it floats to put its back up against the wall. And out from the darkness, with this mischievous laughter, 3 Impidimps walk out with pebbles bouncing them in their hand. They chatter amongst themselves for a second, pointing at Solosis, laughing as they throw more pebbles at it. This dummy's on our turf. Yeah, what's this guy thinking? Let's take him down, boys. Or at least that's what Solosis is believing they're saying, as they continue to stone Solosis. Now at this point, Solosis has been trying to erect a psychic barrier to block itself, but it can't because it's still woozy from that strike from the back of its head. Its head, it's hurting. Worse and worse and worse. This pain keeps growing and growing, even worse than the pebbles that are being thrown at it right now. As we look at Solosis, a lump begins to form at the top of its head and grow and grow and grow. It almost looks like a pimple. It's at this point that Solosis cries out in an immense pain as the pimple pops, and the room fills with a bright blue glow. This was a spark of evolution. Because Solosis' one brain was damaged and couldn't figure a way out of the situation, it decided to multiply, and that's what caused an evolution into Duosion. Now having a second brain to rely on, Duosion knows exactly what it must do. And even though these Impidimps just witnessed an evolution, they don't care. This thing's still weak. And so they continue to throw pebble after pebble after pebble, but all of the pebbles are stopping midair. They keep throwing them and throwing them because at least one's got to get through, right? But no, they all just freeze right before Duosion's body. Now being out of ammo, the Impidimps look at each other, not knowing what to do next. And as they do, all the pebbles slowly turn around towards the Impidimps and launch at bullet-like speeds. The Impidimps try to turn to run, even crawling over each other, trying to escape this onslaught, but no, it's way too late. All 3 of the Impidimps are absolutely riddled by these stone bullets that Duosion just launched off. Whether knocked out or dead, Duosion doesn't want to stick around to find out, as it quickly flies over their bodies and darts down the hallway. Now it's not really sure which way it should go next because Duosions have 2 brains, and more often than not, those 2 brains don't really agree with each other. And so for half an hour, Duosion is stuck in the middle of this hallway trying to decide whether it should go left or right. Eventually, the brains compromise on going down the left, dimly lit hallway instead of the right hallway that is completely shrouded in darkness. We don't know what's down there, and we're not too sure we want to find out, as they quickly fly down the dimly lit hallway. Coming to a set of broken doors, they push the doors open with their psychic abilities and come to a giant open room. Duosion's second brain telling the first brain that it remembers this room. This is the room where they used to battle test. Floating in and looking around, Duosion is in awe of how different this room looks now, the different vibe that it gives off. This room used to be a space to test one's might, to push further, to go beyond. But now in its broken down and disheveled state, it is a husk of what it once was. Now at this point, Brain 2 is completely lost in the memory of this place, but Brain 1, after that last sneak attack, realizes it can never let its guard down again. And thank Arceus that it didn't, because it feels a presence behind it. Brain 1 taking full control of the body and turning around, it sees the assailant, a slightly taller, lankier version of the creatures that just pelted it with rocks earlier, with hair covering one eye and going all the way down its back. What it sees is what we would know to be a Morgrome. As it is dragging one of the lifeless bodies of the Impidimp behind it, it drops it on the floor. It points at the Impidimp and points at the Duosion, yelling some sort of obscenities, something that neither we nor the Duosion would be able to translate. We can kind of get the vibe that it's angry. But by this time, the second brain is already back in action and wastes no time in psychically picking up a rock and throwing it at the Morgrome. Morgrome throwing up its left hand, a reflective barrier appears in front of it, the rock slamming into and crumbling into pieces. Morgrome snickering behind the reflective barrier. Brain 1 sends a message to Brain 2 saying that might be the reflective barrier that they've seen in the past. Physical attacks are not going to be as effective against something like that. And so Brain 2 says, well, I'll just blast it directly then, and shoots off a psychic blast. Morgrome confidently struts through the reflective barrier, taking the psychic blast on itself, not being affected at all. Brain 2 being completely confused. Why didn't its attack do anything? And Brain 1 realizing it must be one of those types. There were some Pokemon back when it was battle testing that it wasn't able to affect with its psychic abilities. Brain 2 continuing to launch off psychic abilities because there's no way this doesn't work. Picking up more and more rocks and throwing them at Morgrem, Morgrem effortlessly throws up reflective barriers blocking them all. Both brains feeling a pit of despair. How are they going to beat this monster that they can't touch? Morgrem smiling, seeing his chance to attack as this thing's will is falling, rushes in and pierces Duosion through the body with its hair spear. Coughing up bubbles of green jelly mixed with some red substance, Duosion flies back into the back wall. But you won't get away from Morgrem as he chases it down, continuing the onslaught. Even in the midst of this flurry of attacks, both brains are rapidly thinking of a plan, a way out. How can we get this thing off of us? And Brain 1 has an idea and tells it to Brain 2. And if brains could smile, they would, because Brain 2 overly agrees. As they both combine their psychic powers together, they stretch it throughout the room across all of the rubble that they just threw. Morgrem kinda noticing this doesn't stop the onslaught, but definitely slows down. They continue to stretch their powers throughout the room, but Morgrem is getting tired of this. It's ready to finish this fight. But just as it is about to land the finishing blow, it sees a shadow crest over it. A giant hand? You see, the entire time during this onslaught from Morgrem, Duosion was spreading its powers throughout the room to collect all of the rubble into a giant pseudo-hand. As it wraps the pseudo-hand around Morgrem struggling to get out, it can't move anymore. It's too late. As Duosion lifts up the Morgrem and slams it into the ground head first, its body going stiff for a second and then limping over. Good night, both the brains think at the same time. Brain 2 thinks that better be the last of them, and Brain 1 agrees. Badly hurt, it floats up to go out of the room, and something horrible happens. The room fills with a bright blue glow, and Duosion, having witnessed this time and time again, knows exactly what is happening. It turns around in horror as the hair that was on the ground curls and wraps around the broken body of this Morgrem. More and more hair filling out the body, turning into what is essentially muscle fibers. Growing larger and larger as it stands back up, Grimmsnarl has clawed its way back from the brink of death. Looking over its own new, stronger body, Grimmsnarl smiles and points at Duosion. "You're finished," is the message that Duosion receives from that point. Before Duosion can even react, a giant black fist of hair meets its body and slams it into a nearby wall. The hair wrapping itself around Duosion, constricting it, slamming it into the floor over and over and over again. Floor, wall, ceiling, floor, wall, ceiling, just an entire combo of being slammed around, thrown around this room. It is at this point that both brains agree that this is the end and there is nothing they can do in this situation. They don't have enough strength to create another giant pseudo-hand. Psychic abilities do not work on this type of Pokemon. And it seems as if this Pokemon is even stronger than it was before. All it wanted to do is find where it came from. All it wanted to do was know its beginning. Boom, 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 as it continuously gets slammed around this room. Grimmsnarl, overjoyed at this newfound power, laughs loudly because it's just destroying this thing. It's invincible. Wrapping both hands of hair around Duosion and rapidly spinning around, it throws Duosion, slamming it into the back wall. Duosion drops to the ground with barely any life in its body, not even able to float. Grimmsnarl, filled with a mixture of arrogance and confidence, walks over to Duosion, kicking its almost lifeless body back into the wall once more. As Duosion bounces off the wall once again, happy memories start flashing through its mind. Memories of it talking and eating with people and Pokemon, making connections, forming bonds, making memories, and seeing once again its friends, its family all sitting around. Just a multitude of wonderful people and minds all around with the same goal. Brain 1 stops on that word, multitude. It sends this message up to Brain 2. Brain 2 pondering for a second on that word as well. Multitude, multitude, multiply. Neither one of the two brains at this current moment are able to see a way out of this situation. Because at this point, both brains are spent. Psychic abilities don't work on this thing and physical objects won't hurt this thing either. They are at their limit. But what if there was more of them? What if there were more brains to think of more scenarios and more situations to get out of here? To beat this monster. And as they do, they both start feeling an immense pain. Growing and growing and growing, lumps forming all over both of them at this point. Growing and growing and growing like pimples all over both the sides of the brains, they begin to multiply. And as Grimmsnarl confidently struts, it stops in its tracks as it witnesses the blue brilliance that is evolution. And as the blue light begins to fade, there, left in Duosion's place, is the multiplying Pokemon Reuniclus. With every single one of its brains working at 110%, it has figured out a way to get out of here. You see, there is one thing that Grimmsnarl had over Duosion this entire time, and that is speed. And every single one of Duosion's brains think, what if? What if there was a space, a room where I was the fast one, where I was the one with all the speed? And so Duosion pushes both of its hands forward, concentrating all of its psychic energy into the tips of its fingers, and expands a domain of its own creation. Bizarre area in which the slower Pokemon gets to go first. Trick Room. And so as the room completes, Grimmsnarl roars, "What is this thing doing? You're gonna try to fight me back?" And as soon as he goes into attack, Reuniclus disappears from sight. Reappearing directly above Grimmsnarl, Reuniclus swings its arm down in a hammer-like fashion, smashing the top of Grimmsnarl's head. Over and over and over again, like a rotating sledgehammer, Reuniclus absolutely pummels Grimmsnarl into the ground. Grimmsnarl stands back up and puts his arms up in defense, but Reuniclus is already gone again and appears right behind, punching it right in the kidney. An absolute onslaught from 360 degrees on top of this Grimmsnarl. Grimmsnarl cannot believe what is happening, what is going on, as it is being beaten and pummeled from all different sides. Grimmsnarl almost started to believe that Reuniclus had cloned itself at some point. The onslaught not letting up in the slightest, Reuniclus continues on, beating this thing into a crater into the ground, as it flies all the way up to the ceiling of the room, putting both of its hands above its head and coming down with an ultimate double hammer arm, absolutely flattening the Grimmsnarl's chest, destroying whatever was on the inside. And as Grimmsnarl chokes up its last breath, Reuniclus sighs a sigh of pure exhaustion as the domain fades. Even with all of the brain power that Solosis and Duosion had, they would have never thought to fight physically like this, but Reuniclus loves it. And so Reuniclus passes out after this point. After about 2 or 3 hours, Reuniclus wakes up to a dark room. It floats and sits up hurriedly to look and see if there's any other assailants that are about to attack it, but the room is clear. The only thing that is left is the remains of the Grimmsnarl. As it slowly floats itself upright, all of the brains that Reuniclus has have one collective thought: please let him have been the last one. And so Reuniclus floats its way out of the room, back down the hallways. Using its brand new fighting style, it smashes the debris that it used to crush that amalgamation and makes its way back out of the front doors of the laboratory. As the sun shines bright, it looks up, grateful to just be alive at this point. What it was looking for was unfortunately not in this laboratory, but it has all the time in the world to find out its origins and where it was born. As Reuniclus floats further and further away from the laboratory on the search for its beginning. This episode was way too long, but it was way too fun to tell. And if you stayed the entire time, please let me know down in the comment section, because that is absolute pure dedication, and I really, really appreciate you. I cannot promise the other episodes are gonna be this long, but I am done talking. I've held you here long enough. Stay tuned for the next one. When it comes to Pokédex lore and Pokemon, a lot of the times the Pokemon world is cruel just as it is harsh. So today, let's look at a story about a lone Impidimp and its 3 siblings. We pick up our story in a eerily silent forest with a lone Impidimp dragging behind him 3 eggs on a sort of carriage made out of leaves and sticks. While traveling through this dark forest, the only thing that is replaying through Impidimp's mind is the final mission, the final prerogative left to it by its mother Grimmsnarl: protect your siblings. As Impidimp watched on in horror as its mother was torn apart by the forest witch herself. Shaking off those negative thoughts, Impidimp continues on its way through this eerie, silent forest. Coming up to a very small pond, Impidimp stops to get a drink of water before he hears rustling behind him. This rustling starting to get louder and louder and louder, hearing thumps in the ground. Impidimp quickly dragging the eggs to a nearby bush and jumping up to a tree branch. Sitting atop this tree branch, Impidimp watches closely as a large brown bear Pokemon that we would know to be an Ursaring sniffs the air looking for something. Its mouth foaming and drooling as it continues to sniff the air in search of something. And as it continues to sniff, its nose leads it in the direction of where the eggs are. You see, this Ursaring was starving and it smelled the eggs nearby and wants a meal. With fear growing in its chest, Impidimp almost yells out to it, but it's terrified of what could happen. It's never fought something like this. What is it supposed to do? But those words play again: protect your siblings. And so just as Ursaring is about to find the eggs, Impidimp jumps onto its back, scratching and clawing at its eyes. Ursaring reeling and roaring, not knowing what is going on, its eyes are being gouged out. Impidimp continues to scratch with nothing but fear in his heart. He is moving on pure instinct right now. And so Ursaring finally gets a hold of this Impidimp and throws him into a nearby tree. Its back slamming onto the tree and it dropping to the ground, but quickly recovering. Impidimp puts his hands together, conjuring up a dark ball of energy and throws it at the Ursaring. Ursaring bats it away as it runs up and punches Impidimp in the stomach. Impidimp, as it coughs up whatever was in its stomach at the time, and again gets knocked away to another nearby tree. Ursaring roaring, stomping around loudly, knocking over nearby trees to get closer to this thing that just scratched his eyes. Even though it can barely see through those bloody eyes, it knows exactly where that scent is. I know where you are. And so as it continues knocking through trees, stomping and stomping, Impidimp realizes something. It realizes how quiet this forest has been. The only other Pokemon that it has run into so far is this Ursaring, and it's screaming. It's way too loud. As Impidimp realizes this, it puts its hands up to the Ursaring. Ursaring stopping its charge, it looks confused. Impidimp slowly lifting a finger, putting it over its lips. Shh. Angry at the audacity of this little Pokemon to tell me to shush, he slams it into another tree. Impidimp hits the tree and lands kinda awkward but still crawls its way back to its feet, telling it to wait again, be quiet. Ursaring roaring loudly again and getting ready to charge at Impidimp before going stiff. As Impidimp is staring at his face, all it sees is its eyes roll back into the back of its head and it dropped to the floor. A long tentacle with 3 claws having dug their way into Ursaring's back detach and retreat into the darkness. Impidimp, realizing exactly what just happened, scurries up into the tree and hides. Impidimp covers its mouth and nose to not make a single solitary sound as she has arrived. And out of the darkness steps the Forest Witch, scratching the back of her head. Looking down at the loud, boisterous Ursaring, it continues to stab and stab and stab at it just to make sure that loud noise is gone. The Forest Witch Hatterini looks around to try to find what that other, quieter noise was. She wants to get it too, just to make sure it doesn't bother her either. But after looking around and searching through a couple of bushes, she can't find anything. And so instead of combing over every single leaf in the area, she decides to save her time and enjoy her silence and solitude as she walks off into the darkness. 10, 20, 30 minutes, Impidimp waits on the top of that tree silently, only taking the smallest amount of breaths possible just to make sure enough space is between him and the Forest Witch. Before eventually Impidimp jumps down the tree and then grabs the leaves and quickly makes its way, continuing deeper into the forest, but the opposite direction of the Forest Witch, obviously. Tired, hungry, after days of travel, Impidimp has finally reached Salvation, a random abandoned building. But to us, we would see a very familiar looking laboratory as Impidimp drags the eggs on the inside. Traveling down a hallway that is filled with broken beakers, strewn about papers, and puddles of slime and sewage, Impidimp continues to drag his siblings through the building. Impidimp comes to a very shaky looking part of the hallway as he looks up at how this building is still standing. Impidimp slowly but surely crawls its way through that shaky, almost derelict hallway. As soon as he reaches a certain section, the hallway behind him crumbles down, almost crushing the eggs. Impidimp jumps back and checks all over all 3 of the eggs just to make sure there's no cracks, and thankfully there's none. Breathing a sigh of relief, Impidimp leaves the eggs in the middle of the hallway and begins checking the nearby rooms for any sort of food or nutrients it can eat. It finds a couple of old berries and maybe a handful of Poke food that it scarfs down, but besides that, nothing too crazy. And so, being absolutely exhausted, Impidimp continues to drag his siblings down the hallway to where he finds this sort of playroom where he lays his siblings down, he lays down, and falls asleep for the night. A few months go by, and at this point, the 3 siblings have hatched into very rowdy and mischievous Impidimps, and our main boy Impidimp has reached that spark of evolution, becoming the Pokemon we know to be as Morgrem. Now, Morgrem is a very attentive older sibling into where he gets onto them for any little thing that they do. I mean, essentially being a single parent of 3 children is not easy. Morgrem wonders how his mother was about to handle 4. And so one day, Morgrem sits his 3 siblings down as he's explaining to them how he's about to leave to go get some food. They all hear something. They hear a loud crash out in the hallway before seeing a random green gelatinous orb floating down the hall. As they watch this thing go past, Morgrem pays it no mind as they just ran out of food again. The 3 siblings all mischievously laughing with each other, Morgrem barks at them to focus. It explains in a language that we wouldn't understand that it's about to go leave to get food and they need to stay in this room until it returns. Regretfully, they all throw their heads back in an okay type manner as Morgrem looks at them, points, and heads out. Morgrem searching the other parts of this room for about 10 to 15 minutes as he searches for food for them. Morgrim knows that his siblings don't mean bad because he was just like them when he was younger. Even though this is difficult, he will still remember his mother's words to protect them, and honestly, he's feeling kind of proud of the older sibling that he's become. Very responsible. As Morgrim is searching through the cabinets, it stops and freezes in shock as it hears something like a minigun going off. That sound was way louder than any one of his 3 siblings could have got into. What was that? Morgrim panicked, turns around and runs down the hallway back to where his siblings were. As it busts into the room looking for its siblings, it doesn't see them at all and starts frantically looking around. The playground. Morgrim darts to the playground as fast as it can before it comes upon a horrible sight. All 3 of its siblings in a pile on top of each other, lifeless. Morgrim's entire being filled with dread. What just happened in the last couple of minutes that I was gone? As it sits there holding, crying to one of its siblings' lifeless body, it hears something in the hallway. Morgrim jumps up looking up the hallway and it sees an odd green thing floating down the left, dimly lit hallway. You, Morgrim thinks, before grabbing one of its siblings and running down the hallway after it. As it runs to the push-open doors of this large, giant room, Morgrim sees the assailant staring at the back wall. Morgrim barks at the assailant to turn around, face me, as the thing turns around quickly, noticing its presence. It starts barking, "How could you do this? Why did you do that? They were just kids!" But the green thing looking confused, not knowing what it's saying. The green thing starts to glow, lifting up these rocks and throwing them at Morgrim. Morgrim throws up its hand, putting up a reflective barrier that severely weakens physical attacks. The green thing, although a bit shocked, starts glowing with another energy and launches off a psychic blast. Morgrim, confident and angry, steps through the barrier and takes the blast on itself, not affected at all. And Morgrim can notice that the green thing is a bit shocked by this too, but it doesn't waste any time with its onslaught. He takes his chance to rush in and pierce the green thing through the body. But it doesn't stop there as it starts its onslaught of attacks, letting out all of its anger for all 3 of its lifeless siblings. It completely beats into this thing, until curiously it starts to notice how all of the rocks are slightly floating above the ground. It can feel a sort of energy filling the room. It slows down just a little bit. Finally, Morgrim decides that's enough as it's about to finish this thing off before stopping after seeing a shadow crest over its body. A giant stony hand wraps around Morgrim's body, picking him up and slamming into the ground head first. Morgrim's body goes stiff and then goes limp as his thoughts start to fade. No, this thing took my siblings. I can't go now. All of these thoughts begin rushing through its brain as its body begins to glow, a bright blue, the blue brilliance of evolution. The green thing turns around in horror as the hairs that are on the ground begin to curl themselves around Morgrim's body, its body getting larger, almost becoming muscle fibers. As Morgrim pulls its head out of the ground and stands up looking and pointing at the green thing, Grimmsnarl has crawled its way back from the brink of death. As it's pointing, it says "you're finished" in its own weird language, as it begins another onslaught of attacks, completely blitzing this green thing over and over and over again, slamming it into the floor, wall, ceiling, floor, wall, ceiling. It spins the green thing around, throwing it into a wall across the room. Chasing it down, it kicks it into the wall again. Confidently walking over, ready to finish his Pokemon off. The blue glow of evolution shines on that Pokemon instead. Grimmsnarl stands there shocked after just watching the blue glow bless this Pokemon as well. But a sense of dread fills Grimmsnarl in this moment. You see, earlier it let its guard down. It noticed the energy filling the room, but it didn't do anything about it. It didn't think this thing was strong enough. And it can feel that same energy again as the creature begins to lift its arms and put them out forward. This feeling of dread deepens even further. Every single one of Grimmsnarl's hairs is yelling at it that if they don't finish this thing now, we're done. We won't get our revenge for our siblings. And so this time, Grimmsnarl decides to listen, as he curls the hair fibers around his calf to launch himself forward at the green thing. Flying through the air, he lands, grabbing the arms of this green thing just as it's about to release that psychic energy. The green thing looks confused as its arms are now outstretched to its side. Grimmsnarl, opening its mouth as wide as it can, charges up the deepest, darkest, blackest energy it can in the back of its throat and shoots a beam of Vanta Black energy directly at this creature's body. He continues pushing and pushing and pushing all of that negative emotion, his siblings, everything that he felt in these last few moments, he lets it all out in that beam. As the beam finishes its job, Grimmsnarl closes his mouth and stumbles back. That took a lot of energy. As Grimmsnarl looks up, he sees a deep crater in the wall where the green thing was. He drops the 2 remaining arms of this green thing on the floor with a splat. As he turns and picks up the body of one of his siblings, he goes and gets the other 2 as well. Grimmsnarl walking back down the hallways that he came through the first time. Going back to that collapsed hallway, he uses the hair fibers on his arm, reinforcing it and punching through the debris. Stepping through some muck and grime, he makes his way outside. Using and shaping their hairs, he makes a sort of shovel where he digs a grave for his 3 deceased siblings, where he lays them all in side by side, grabbing a couple of mushrooms from the nearby trees and placing them on each of the graves. A couple of tears drop from Grimmsnarl's eye as he looks up and wonders, is his mom watching? Does she know that he failed her? And so somberly, Grimmsnarl turns to look at the laboratory, turns back, and walks into the forest. I'm not gonna lie, I really do like the whole multiverse thing that we got going on here. And if you were at all confused as to what was going on in this story, make sure to go watch the Reuniclus story to fill in all the details. Though it does end quite differently. Make sure you like, follow, and share for more content, and I will see y'all in the next one.